Like, they're going to drop one occasionally, but they're going to make so many big plays, it doesn't matter. I think DeVonta Smith is going to be that guy. But the indictment of having to take another receiver in the top 10 after all the assets you poured into the position, that might be the biggest indictment of this organization of it all.
About 14 or 15 minutes of broadcast tremendousness on the air before Comcast said, no, you guys really don't need to do Birds 365. We plan on staying the full 2 hours for you guys. I would be Jody McDonald. You see in the Philly red shirt, I thought this was Birds 365. That's all right. We like the Phillies too. Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports, and his smiling face, although it's not live, is John McMullen because he's got COVID testing duties to do. So you get a triumvirate of Eagle experts to start the show. Jeff Kerr, good to see you. How was your weekend?
Like you, Jody, I was at a wedding. It wasn't as nice as Key West, but DC was very peaceful. It was a great wedding. Got to see my college roommate get married. A lot of fun. We bragged about that. We should have been at the beach, but hey, you know what? We'll take DC for a weekend.
DC was peaceful. You don't always get a chance to say that. I'm glad it worked that way for you. All right, John McMullen will be with us for the first half hour of the show. Then he's got to go in and get something stuck up his nose to find out if he's okay. J-Mac.
By the way, I want to say, can I say, is that an ode to Nick Sirianni? I think Nick Sirianni won Phillies yesterday, Jeff.
He
I
did.
think he won Phillies.
He did.
That was Monday. Sorry.
Yeah. Last time Nick Sirianni spoke, he did go Phillies.
Yeah, he went Phillies.
Not the first time Nick Sirianni went sucking up for something other than water to water his plants. But
that's what I was going for, Jeff.
Yeah,
well done.
I picked up on it. J-Mac, heading off. I know you got the COVID testing and the like, but you were there yesterday as well for the coordinator, Jonathan Gannon. I got to say, I liked what he had to say. There was some guys coming at him pretty good, yourself included, with questions yesterday, and he rolled with the punches as best he could. But I don't know why, but he was channeling Andy Reid for me because he seemed to take the bullets for absolutely everybody. Again, he defended Derek Barnett. You know, I got a mad on for Derek Barnett because I think he stinks and is stealing money these days. He went to bat and defended him and saying he's getting the job done. I just didn't understand it. When you gathered with your guys, or at least exchanged some notes as you're walking out after talking to Jonathan Gannon yesterday, what was the feel among the Eagle beat guys as to Jonathan Gannon, both what his team is doing on the field and how he's handling the questions he has to answer about it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think much changed other than I think that was the first time I've seen an Eagles assistant or any Eagles coach, coordinator, the head coach, with the exception of Nick Sirianni going the Jeff Kerr route and going Phillies, Sixers, Flyers. It's the first time somebody didn't wear Eagles gear, so you had the conspiracy theorist. What's going on? But no, I mean, that's Jonathan. You talk about taking hits, Andy Reid. I mean, this is the guy who said Ryan Kerrigan was productive a couple weeks ago. He's not going to bury his players. That's not his philosophy. He was typically his optimistic self. I mean, I thought it was, I'm trying to figure out this disconnect of why the heck everybody's completing 80% of their passes, or at least all the good quarterbacks, and Derek Carr over 90%. And you're trying to get a thought process on that. And part of it is, the most important part to him is limiting explosive plays. And he said that again, the quickest way to get beat is for the ball to go over your head. So that's his core philosophy. And then you start to say, okay, well, still, I mean, other people have played a lot of cover too and not given up 90% completion rates or 85% or 80. And then you start to hear the people are getting the ball out quickly because of our defensive line. And maybe that's the case, but this defensive line has not played well. So maybe that's the rest of the league reacting to the reputation, because I think we all came into this season saying, all right, the defensive line is going to be a strength of the Eagles. And probably the rest of the league thought that as well. And they're like, we got to get the ball out quickly. Well, if anybody watches the film, you don't need to get the ball out quickly because they're not doing their job. And I've said that pretty consistently for about 2 weeks now. Now, part of that is Brandon Graham not being there. And he's, I think, maybe the most underrated professional sports figure in Philadelphia over the last decade plus. People don't realize how good that guy is. And now they're starting to realize it. So part of it is that, but you got to perform better if you're Fletcher Cox, if you're Josh Sweat, if you're Jody's favorite, Derek Barnett, and yes, even Javon Hargrave, who had a good month, but if people haven't noticed, he's not having a good second month. So I think the plan was to lean on that defensive front because of the deficiencies you have on the back end. Well, that front, you can't lean on him right now. And that, to me, is the biggest issue.
John, did Jonathan Gannon address the struggles of the defensive line yesterday? And, if he was asked, what was his response?
No, well, again, Jonathan isn't going to say so-and-so's playing poorly. And by the way, for people who criticize him for that, I think they'd criticize him even more if he did do that. And I don't know of any coach that does do that. Occasionally, you'll get a more gruff coordinator or head coach that'll say something like, we got to play better, or so-and-so's got to play better. But that's as far as it goes. I mean, that does no good. I was thinking about it yesterday, and here's how I phrase it. The Eagles' best linebacker this year, and he's, emerged to the top of the depth chart, is TJ Edwards. And he's done a really nice job for what was expected of TJ Edwards. That's how I would describe it. If you look at the 31 other teams around the NFL, and this is probably a better question for you, Jeff, because you spend more time doing league stuff than I do these days. I don't know many teams that don't have a linebacker better than TJ Edwards in this league. Nothing against TJ Edwards. Then I go back to safety. The best safety the Eagles have had this year has been Marcus Epps. Marcus Epps. Yep. He's not even a starter at this point. Probably should be because he deserves to be. But again, I use that same phrase. Go around to the 31 other teams. Who doesn't have a safety, at least one safety better than Marcus Epps? That's what you're dealing with the personnel deficiencies on the back end.
Detroit's better secondary than the Eagles.
I didn't hear what you say, Jeff.
Detroit is a better safety group than the Eagles with Tracy.
That's scary if that's true.
Yeah.
All right, John, I hear what you say about coaches just don't point to players and go, he's not good enough, he's not getting it done. It's standard operating procedure across the league. Some go further in defending him than others. Like I said, Andy Reid just comes to mind. Never, ever, ever, ever threw a guy under the bus the whole time he was here. So if you can't say anything, then the only way to show a player that they're not getting the job done is playing time, that you don't use them as much as maybe you once did. Yet I look down and Derek Barnett is the second most snap used guy on the Eagles in a game against the Chargers on Sunday. So you're not going to call him out. As a matter of fact, someone brought his name specifically up and he defended him to a length that I didn't think was possible. And then he continues to use him. More so than any other defensive end. The only guy who played more snaps on the D-line was Fletcher Cox. How does it get to Derek Barnett that he stinks? Does he have to watch Birds 365 and listen to me berate him? Because it sure as heck isn't coming from his coaching staff.
Well, again, I would ask, because if you've seen, and I'll use the back end as an example again, well, TJ Edwards, wasn't the full-time linebacker at the start of the season. He's playing because somebody got benched and somebody got cut. Marcus Epps is playing more because he's playing winning football, as Jonathan Gannon stated. At the beginning of the season, he was behind Kayvon Wallace, who I don't even think had a snap. So there are adjustments being made as far as playing time. I would say, if Brandon Graham was healthy, I would say that's a more legitimate criticism. For now, you got to play Barnett and Sweat at defensive end. And technically you could play Teron Jackson, I suppose. You could play more Ryan Kerrigan, I suppose. I think in that instance, it's only getting worse. So I think when you have another option, that lever is being pulled. And when you don't, that lever isn't being pulled. And that's why I look at those four guys, and I'm adding Josh Sweat and Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. They got to be to bring Jim Schwartz back to town. They got to be the engine of this defense, and that engine hasn't been brought into Jiffy Lube because it is not performing at an optimal level, to say the least.
John, I know the Jets claimed, well, I shouldn't say they claimed, they signed Elijah Riley from the Eagles practice squad yesterday, and I know they liked him from that last preseason game. Do the Eagles feel like this is a major loss? I shouldn't even go major loss because they do like Elijah Riley, but was this a guy that the Eagles were even thinking of promoting at any point this season?
No, I mean, not barring injury to someone we talked about. I mean, Rodney McLeod, Anthony Harris are there. We've been talking about Marcus Epps, how well he's played. They still have Kayvon Wallace. So, I mean, that's the thing. The Eagles have been on the verge of losing practice squad players before, and when that comes up, they'll elevate them to the roster. In this particular case, there was, no spot, so to speak, for Elijah Riley. He made the right decision for him. The Jets lost Marcus May to a torn Achilles, so they needed a safety, and he'll get a better opportunity. So I think, that works out well for Elijah. But no, I mean, if the Eagles wanted to keep him, they would have created a 53-man roster spot because they have 77 corners. So they could have done it easily if they wanted to. But they like their young safeties, and you can debate that as far as who's better. But yeah, I mean, there's so many issues with this defense. I don't think Elijah Riley is going to make the difference. Sorry, Jody.
That's okay. My Jets are what they are. And that was one of the lowlights of the weekend away I had, screaming and yelling in a tiki bar, getting their tails kicked by Carson Wentz. But we're off the birds. I need to get back. All right, JM, you, much like Jonathan Gannon, spent some quality time in Minnesota, now more years removed here in Philadelphia than JG. But certainly his fingerprints are still noticed going from Minnesota to Philadelphia. Have you scoured the Viking roster yet as to what guys are going to be free agents who the Eagles are going to sign during this offseason, who will be woefully underperformers when they get here to Philadelphia?
Well, no, the Vikings are having a ton of issues themselves, and I think, we're seeing the death throes of the Mike Zimmer era. But, as much criticism as Mike Zimmer gets as a head coach, and all deservedly so, I would, he coaches games like it's 1975, and you see they're in every game, and they find a new way to lose basically every week because he doesn't try to win games. He coaches not to lose them. So I say that for the reason that, yeah, he's not a good head coach, certainly in this era of football, but he's a really, really good defensive mind. And I say, if you talk to people around this league, the two names that come up the most to me, and Jeff, you can chime in on this, is always Zimmer. When it comes to defense, it's always Zimmer and a guy the Eagles are playing this week, Vic Fangio, who I also think isn't a great head coach, but he's a great defensive mind. And that's one of the reasons, people criticize me for protecting. What was I doing when you weren't here, Jeff? When Jody wasn't here, I was accused of protecting Jonathan Gannon.
I don't think you were protecting him on Monday.
Yeah, I'm. When guys like Zimmer and Fangio swear by the guy, and Brandon Staley throw him on that as well. I mean, yeah, that holds some weight with me. Doesn't mean you can overcome personnel issues. I'll tell you what, I would love to see this defense with if they had a linebacker like Anthony Barr, or Eric Kendricks, or a safety like Harrison Smith. I think it would look a lot different. I can't prove that, but I think it would look a lot different.
How would Kareem Jackson look in Midnight Green right now?
Yeah, a lot of players would look. I mean, Justin Simmons this week is what Darius Leonard I talk about because of Indy. I mean, these are the types of players the Eagles don't have, and they enable you to do a lot of different things because of their ability. Gannon went off about pre-snap disguise, and he didn't say the name, but you knew who he was talking about. He was talking about Harrison Smith, because anybody who's ever watched him play, he'll go down into the box. He'll scream out of the box to get back to playing cover two or single one, all these different things to throw a quarterback out of whack. The Eagles can't do that. They can't do that because they don't have that type of player.
All right, JM, let me ask you about changes ongoing while the game is going on. I think it was Howard brought this up about the Eagles deciding to change their defense on the fly, audibling out, call it what you want, checking out for specific calls as the play is just about to take off because they don't like the matchup of what the offensive team has come out with, the formation they're using, the set that they're using. Who's making those on-air changes, those on-field changes? Who's the guy who's calling them out of certain blitzes or attempting to get them into blitzes at the very last second? Who is their defensive captain if they're overriding what Jonathan Gannon wants to happen on a particular play?
Yeah, well, that's one of the issues as well, because they haven't, people think traditionally the Mike linebacker. Now, a lot of days in today's NFL, it's really the free safety who does stuff like that, and the Eagles have had a mismatch of Eric Wilson, who's not even here anymore, Alex Singleton. Now it's T.J. Edwards, a linebacker, and safety. It was Anthony Harris, and then Rodney comes back, and it's Rodney. So that's one of the issues as well. They haven't had somebody that they can be the quarterback of the defense. Hopefully that calms down now that TJ Edwards is basically, I think he was on the field for 66 of 68 snaps, and Rodney was out there for 68. So those are the two guys you have to count on. I would hope they would go to TJ Edwards. He's a very smart player, high football IQ, and if he's going to be out there, he should be the guy doing that.
John, how did you feel Zach McPherson played on Sunday for the little bit he was in?
It was fun. In fact, I was a little surprised. We talk about I as soon as I saw Slay had to leave, I said, "Uh-oh, here we go. They're just going to pick on 27," which sounds weird, by the way, because that's Malcolm Jenkins' number. And they didn't. And a lot of it was obviously the Eagles played a lot of zone in the second half. And that, I think, helped as well. So overall, I thought he was fine, but I don't know if he was fine because they were, masking, hiding those deficiencies. But certainly the Chargers didn't take advantage of the fact that he was on the field. And that part surprised me a little bit from the Chargers' perspective. But nobody complains about stuff like that when you win. They only complain. The Chargers would have heard about that if they would have lost that game and said, "Why aren't you attacking the rookie corner who hasn't played?" I will say that, the Eagles have 75 different rookie corners now after they acquired Tate Gallen and Kerry Vincent, and most of them were inactive. and they finally waived Mac McCain, which was my prediction. That'll be Jordan Howard's spot. They haven't wanted Zach McPherson on the field, so that to me is a bigger red flag than him playing zone coverage. But against the Chargers, he was fine, and there was no overt grand mistakes. Now, part of it is Slay and Nelson and Maddox have been the strength of this defense. Think about that for a second, but that's been the case.
Twofold defensive back question for you. Number one, would you recognize Mac McCain now that he's gone?
He would not.
No, I'm so disappointed because I wouldn't. I did see a picture. Somebody, Getty Images must have gotten a picture of him at one point because I saw somebody had a picture of him.
He did get his number right Monday, Jody.
Above and beyond Mac McCain, that's impressive. My other DB question is, how does Kayvon Wallace not get one defensive snap when as many DBs went down in the game on Sunday? And I know he's a safety and they needed corners, but they asked their safeties to cover because they're in zone as often as they are. What went wrong? Is he still partially injured, not 100%? Have they changed their opinion on him? At one point this year, it looked like he was going to be a starting safety for the Eagles. Now they're playing a game where guys are dropping like flies in the secondary, and he can't get one defensive snap. What has happened to their opinion of Kayvon Wallace?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about before when you said, why is Derek Barnett playing? And why, Derek Barnett's playing because he has to. Kayvon Wallace isn't playing because he got beat out by Marcus Epps, who's just a better player. And that's why he's not playing. Kayvon's one of those guys. I don't know. It's weird. Philadelphia's weird with certain guys. They latch on to certain guys. I call it skipping steps. I think Kayvon's one of those guys. For some reason, I don't know if it's personality. I don't know. They thought he was going to be a starting safety. I mean, he has not played well when he had the opportunities, and Marcus Epps just lapped him. And that's an example of where this coaching staff and TJ Edwards would be the other example. They're better, so they're playing. That's what it comes down to.
Well, I think I might have an answer to the Kayvon Wallace thing. They see safety from Clemson, and they think, oh, the last safety from Clemson the Eagles drafted is in the Hall of Fame. So,
there you go. I like it.
Naturally, Kayvon Wallace is going to be in the Hall of Fame, and why isn't he playing? I digress. That 2020 draft class, John, since Jody brought up Kayvon Wallace, it's really not looking good right now. When you look at Rager, when you look at Davion, Jalen Hurts is probably the best pick, and he wasn't even supposed to start this year. So at least when he was drafted. So what's your quick evaluation of this draft class right now?
Well, yeah, the Jalen Rager pick, I just that's going to haunt them for years. He is not effective as a wide receiver at all. And you could see him pressing. He finally got the football once, and he's trying to make a play out of nothing, and I think he loses 6 yards. And then you have the obvious comp with Jefferson, who's a really good player. That one's going to – and then you got to double down, remember, because Rager's such an overt bust so early in his career – you got to double down and take another receiver in the next year who's going to work out. DeVonta Smith is going to be a really good player. But still, if Jalen Rager, if you're right on him, you could go in a different direction, fill a different hole. And you don't feel that necessity to draft a wide receiver again. So there's so many reverberations to that failed pick. And, everybody's – I always call it that Spider-Man meme. If you see Spider-Man pointing at himself, that's what the Eagles and the old coaching staff and the person – everybody's running away from Jalen Rager like he's a burning fire. Oh, I didn't want this guy. They wanted this guy. Oh, no, this guy won. Poor Jalen Rager. But at the end of the day, and why is he even playing at all at this point? We're talking so much about the defense. I mean, yeah, Quez Watkins has now officially replaced him as the so-called wide receiver 2.
Right.
But you need 3 wide receivers. The Eagles haven't needed it as much in recent weeks because they played the Raiders and the Lions and the Chargers, who coincidentally are all bottom 5 run support teams on defense. So they've shifted their offense almost completely to be so run heavy. Well, that's going to change, or it should change moving forward when you stop playing every single team in the NFL that can't stop the run. At some point, you're going to find a team that can stop the run. And in theory, you want receivers on the field. The problem is, same as we talked about with defensive end. Well, who are you going to play? J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Greg Ward. You got no many assets into the wide receiver position. And all they got to show for it is DeVonta Smith, who's great, but JJ's a second-round pick, Jalen's a first-round pick, and they're getting nothing from those guys.
J-Mac, they made John Hightower one of their protected practice squad players this week. You're right. The wide receiver position hasn't been used much. Yes, they've run the ball effectively the last 2 weeks. Yes, it's going to be that much tougher against a Vic Fangio defense this upcoming week, and then a Saints defense, which has been one of the better ones in the league all year long. So it's going to get more difficult to run the football. They're going to be smart enough and good enough to watch the tape and go, oh, we got to take the running game away from the Eagles and put an extra guy into the box. So, yes, the Eagles are going to need someone other than DeVonta Smith to step up a wide receiver. Is there any chance the return of John Hightower?
Oh, boy. Well, I think it speaks volumes that John Hightower isn't on this 53-man roster, and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is, and Greg Ward is. So, yeah, no. I mean, he was elevated last week. Didn't play much, obviously. Made a bad decision on a kickoff return. Got an opportunity there. Backed the Eagles up from that standpoint. So, no, I mean, it's not as glaring. John was a 5th-round pick and Quez Watkins was a 6th-round pick. So you're just taking swings at that point. And, looks like you've got at least an overachiever as far as where he was drafted in Quez Watkins. I don't know. I still don't think he's a great receiver. He's just the second best receiver on this team. And no, I mean, that's where the criticism should be pointed at Howie Roseman and the personnel department and the assets that they poured into the wide receiver position have not reaped enough back in return. And that's why they were back in the top 10 this year and they had to take a wide receiver. I mean, there's no, as good as DeVonta Smith is, and he had his best game as a pro, I think. And as I said, I think he's going to be a star in this league, especially when the Eagles get a more of a, as I call it, the high volume passer who can get the football down the field consistently. I think he's going to have really big numbers. He's always open. He's going to drop the football occasionally. It seems like that's, if you look at Jamar Chase, if you look at CD Lamb, it's sort of like the give and take you give it the modern receiver. Like they're going to drop one occasionally, but they're going to make so many big plays, it doesn't matter. I think DeVonta Smith is going to be that guy. But the indictment of having to take another receiver in the top 10 after all the assets you poured into the position, that might be the biggest indictment of this organization of it all.
Now, John, if we want to, they might have to triple dip here. I mean, their receiver position's bad enough. Do you go another receiver early next year, or do you try to get a veteran in there just to improve this?
I try to get a veteran. I was screaming for a veteran all summer, and I think it would have helped. Just somebody, who's competent, knows how to line up, can move the chains. They don't need a superstar. I think they have a burgeoning superstar now at the wide receiver position. So they just got to fix the other parts of it. Obviously, Nick Sirianni wants to play 11 personnel if he had his druthers most of the time. So, yeah, you need, and he doesn't like to talk about X and Y and slot and flex, and, says everybody plays everywhere, but that's not realistic when you get into the game. So you want a slot receiver, and you want another outside receiver to complement DeVonta Smith, but you can get that in a lot of different ways, and you can go on the free agent market. And Quez Watkins can continue to develop, hopefully. But, yeah, it's still not a finished product, that's for sure.
All right, JM, I want to get one league-wide question in with you. I know we were going to talk about this yesterday before Comcast kind of pulled the plug on Birds 365.
Who knew Jonathan Gannon had stock in Xfinity internet service?
He might very well.
They're protecting him. They're protecting him.
If he can take down the internet, it'd be nice if he could take down another team's opposing offense, but we'll see if he can actually get that done. No, I was referencing the Monday night game, which was so hard to watch. Every single play was a penalty in the second half of that game. It was mind-numbingly bad to watch. And there was actually some competitive football going on. It comes down to kicks right at the end. Should have been a great game it was a terrible game to watch because of all the flags, including the massive taunting call, which was equally as bad as the awful taunting call that the Eagles got against the Bucs several weeks ago. You and I are on the same page. The game is way over legislated. The referees are getting way more involved than they should be for the enjoyment of the National Football League fan. But they have before had these points of emphasis that they go heavy on in preseason, and then they kind of back it up a little. They don't announce that they're backing it up, but you just tell by the calls or lack thereof that they've had internal discussions that maybe we overstepped our boundaries. Are they going to do that with this taunting mess? Because there have been two outrageously bad calls that I saw. The Eagle one that I referenced against Leonard Fournette, which was a joke. And then what happened in the game between the Bears and the Raiders. The guy just looked at the sideline. He made a play and looked at the sideline and by accident bumped into the ref getting off the field, which some people were suggesting yesterday nationally. The ref hip checked the player, that he was looking to cause the contact so he could throw his flag.
Yeah,
it was a joke.
Well, you had that video of Tony Corrente, so it looked bad. But I always say, you know me, Jody, I don't blame officials. I blame the legislation. People are not. I compare it to play calling. When people criticize play calling, they're not really criticizing play calling. They're criticizing results. They're not really criticizing referees. They're criticizing the rule. The referees are doing what they're told for the most part. They're not perfect, but it's a very difficult job. And by the way, I give Nick Sirianni credit. He always defaults to that. I don't like blaming officials. I never blame officials. So I think more of the problem is what you said is the over legislation of the game. It's ironic to me that the NFL through, source said, no, that's exactly what we're trying to, they doubled down. That's exactly what we're trying to remove from the game. You bring up the end of that game. I think that's the crutch of the NFL. It seems exciting. You got the great throw from Justin Fields. You're going back and forth. The Steelers go down and score again. You got the seesaw, the close game at the very end. And a lot of fans think it's exciting and forget about the god-awful 55 minutes of football they had to get to that point when things started to get exciting. I've talked to so many people at the league office, and they don't realize this is a problem. They don't realize this is a problem, that this sport is. What do you mean? I've had that. When I say, do you think this sport is over? I'll use John Runyon because he's one I can put on the record, but people off the record. Do you realize this league is over legislated? And they'll say, what do you mean over legislated? They don't even realize it because nobody changes the channel. So from their perspective, it's so popular, they don't even look in the mirror, self-scout, whatever you want to say. Are we affecting this game? Are we making this game worse? And they are. And then the second part you said, Jody, sometimes this league thinks they're the Supreme Court. Well, we set this precedent. We can't change it. You can change it anytime you want. You could go in there today and say, you know what? This ain't working. Let's change it. This is no precedent. It's an awful rule. Sit the officials down. Say it's an awful rule. We made a mistake. There's 100, by the way, there are 100 awful rules they can do the same thing with. But they act, precedent, competitive advantage. And then ironically, what proves that's a crock of you-know-what is COVID. Because they don't give a you-know-what about during the whole COVID era where, hey, you're out of luck. Your quarterback thinks he's immunized. You're out of luck. Denver, your whole quarterback room is down. You're out of luck. That happened last year, as people remember. I don't know. I don't know. Well, I do know. This league is so popular, they don't care because you're not changing the channel. And by you're not, I'm not talking about you guys. I'm talking about fans. They're not changing the channel. And they accept it. So this is what they get.
Yeah, and another key point is we at CBS, we talk about this on a Tuesday morning, on a Wednesday morning, and you get the BS pool reports. Honestly, John, I wouldn't mind this if the league would make that official, Tony Corrente, stand up on that podium, before Mike Tomlin, before anybody else, and just give an explanation, but they'll never do it.
Well, and I will say this, because I think that was a horrible call, but Tony Corrente didn't make that rule. He's not responsible for that.
No, he didn't. But
hold on. Let me ask both you guys, you league-wide guys. If Tony Corrente doesn't make that call, are you telling me somebody from the Roger Goodell or any of his underlings is going to call Tony Corrente and go, how did you not throw the flag for tanking? Do you really believe that would have happened?
No. They might have.
Then Tony Corrente made the call. John, you were giving the referees the pass. They're just taking directions. No, Tony Corrente, with the overall understanding of what the league is attempting to do, he made that call himself that I'm throwing the flag right here, right now. Because the guy looked at the other sideline, 40 yards away. The main reason they're trying to take taunting out is they fear that it could lead to violence. There was no chance of violence. So that's a bad call by that referee.
But this is here's where you and I go down different paths, Jody. I agree with you. They might have graded him down, whatever, but they wouldn't have said anything publicly. They had an opportunity. Now, granted, obviously it's unnamed sources, but you see the same national writers pointing the same thing. So we all know who that is, Jeff, pointing out the information. They doubled down. They said, no, that's exactly what we're trying to take out of the game. So they're not only saying Tony Corrente was right, they're doubling down on the fact that he was right. That's where I say that's what they want. Now, your point is well taken. If he didn't put the flag in, and if he didn't take the flag out of his pocket, it wouldn't matter. They weren't going to criticize him. They weren't going, you should have flagged Cassius Marsh. So ultimately it doesn't matter. But the fact that they doubled down and said, this is exactly what we're trying to take out of the game, that tells me it's a league problem. It's not a Tony Corrente problem. That's my framing of it.
I would say it's both, but that's okay because you're right. When they backed Tony's call, they said, yeah, he was just doing as he was schooled to do, but he did do it on his own. So shame on both of them. And yes, popularity gets pomposity because the NFL is just going to continue to go, change our game. Yeah, no, that's not happening with us. Johnny Mac, no, you got to go get a COVID test. Thank you very much for hopping on. I'll get back with you again tomorrow morning at the top of the show. Have a good day. And who you talking to? Anybody other than the doctor? You got any players?
Wednesday. So it's Nick Sirianni Wednesday. All the TV people there. So you'll see a lot of screaming and shouting, wrangling to try to get questions in. Then it's usually Darius Slay kicks off player availability. Darius always, but he's injured, so maybe not. So that'll be interesting.
Now I got to ask you one more question. Now you brought up Darius Slay. Is Darius the guy who's actually going to, because we've had Fletcher Cox several weeks ago say, yeah, I don't play coverage on screenplays. This past week, Javon Hargrave said, yeah, I'm not the defensive coordinator when asked about should they be blitzing more. Will Darius Slay be the guy who kind of throws Jonathan Gannon under the bus, who refuses to throw anyone under the bus, but a couple of players have thrown him under the bus? Will he be the guy who say, yeah, we should play more, man. Yeah, I can play bump and run coverage. Don't look at me. Go ask the defensive coordinator. Will Darius Slay go there today?
No, I don't. Slay is too smart. I mean, he'll say some goofy things, and he's got a hamstring injury, so I don't even know if he's going to talk. But typically leads off Wednesday. But now he's a veteran guy. He's already been asked that question. He just already answered because he's a press coverage guy and he's asked to play so much zone. But he's also playing well, so that helps. And I do, because Fletcher. I do think that has been framed wrong with Fletcher. He said, I don't get paid to play screens, because for years he was one of the best defensive tackles in football playing the screen. I mean, he just had that natural innate ability to know when it was happening and peel off and get the guy. All he said was, I don't get paid to play screens, meaning I get paid to get the quarterback. Obviously, he gets paid to do everything, but he's always been a really good player against screens. So I just want to get that out there.
All right, fair enough. Take Fletcher back. He get any sacks this
I'm
week?
protecting
No.
Fletcher Cox.
Now you're protecting Fletcher Cox, who, oh, by the way, because Hargrave is getting more double teams, Fletcher's not getting them. They can't double team both of the tackles. One of the two of them's got to get a sack this week.
Yeah, they're both.
Well, you can with the inefficiency of Derek Barnett. You most certainly can.
You got a point there. All right. Thanks, J-Mac. Good testing. Hopefully you come back with nothing significant out of your nose.
Yeah. It's always, Jimmy Kempski has that nightmare too. Something comes out on the Q-tip.
Oh.
You got to make sure you're clean and ready to go.
That is John McMullen here with us on Birds 365. All right. Jeff Kerr and I are coming back. Got a good guest coming up in hour number 2. We'll get our boy, BLG, Brennan Lee Gouton of Bleeding Green Nation up. But I still have more questions for Jeff Kerr right here on Birds 365.